Whoa.
There we go.
Hey, I think we're live. What's up? Hey, how's it going, Chris Pickett?
Hello. Hi, Wythe Marschall.
Oh, hey. Are we the hosts of the show?
I think we are. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't quite remember.
Well, there's a lot of people with us today, but for those of you tuning in, this is Why We Roll, the tabletop game design podcast from the Stillfleet Studio, and we're your hosts, and we have 3 guests. That's right, not 1, not 2, but 3 guests from our wonderful fellow, podcast that we like listening to, Dungeons and Drama Nerds, and that is with a plus sign, not an ampersand.
That's right. Very.
Find it by Googling it using any version of and, but it is a plus sign. You could hear it when I said it, right? The plus sign. Yep. I tried to pronounce it right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's pronounced and.
So we have Percy Hornak, Nick Orvis, and Ben Ferber. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks for bringing. You have a bigger crew, right? A large chunk of your crew, and we look forward to talking to all of you, but collectively about Dungeons and Drama Nerds.
How many people are we?
Like 12.
Counting
with
the
varying degrees of participation.
It's higher than that. I think at this point we've got about 16 sort of regulars who we consider our ensemble, and then lots of people who drop in for a show or two.
Nice. Well, for folks who don't know Dungeons and Drama Nerds, I think it'll be pretty obvious why we're having you on. But do you want to say a little about I don't know if this is if I should be directing these questions to all of you or one of you in particular, but can someone or all of you doing a game of what's it called? Two-headed, three-headed giant, introduce Dungeons and Drama Nerds. So what is the show, and what makes it so special? Because it's AP, but it's also more, right? I feel like it's got a lot more going on.
Ooh, AP plus. Again, the
AP
plus sign.
And
plus signs all over.
Like that.
And AP and.
I feel it's an important part of the lore of the podcast to mention that the reason that we decided to make it is because I made a tweet about how many lesbians there are in the world of my homebrew D&D game that I was playing at the time. And our friend Todd Brian Backus commented on that tweet and was like, another topic for our theater and TTRPGs podcast that nobody needs to listen to, but we should make anyway. And then the 3 of us were like, wouldn't it be funny if we made this podcast? And then 5 years later,
here we are.
we're still making the podcast. The conceit of the show is basically the 3 of us are dramaturges by trade profession, which is like a theater discipline that is about contextualizing plays for audiences and giving actors and designers and whatever what they need in order to connect to the world of the play, and a lot of new play development. It's a very nebulous job that mostly consists of having opinions and sharing them courteously and sensitively.
Degrees of courtesy, depending on the context.
to give you 2 examples of things that I have done as a dramaturg that are both of these sort of ends of the spectrum of what dramaturgs do. I dramaturged a play at the Williamstown Theater Festival, and it was a William Inge play that had not really been done. It had been written, and no one ever produced it in any major way. It's called Off the Main Road, and we cast a Black actor as one of the characters, who is a very rich gay man in St. Louis. Who was, of note, a country club member. And the casting was done, I would say, without really thinking, would there be a Black man at a country club? And it was my job to figure out how to make that work. And what I did find out by doing some research, reading a little bit about the history of particularly the wealthy Black community in St. Louis, is there actually were country clubs that Black people went to in St. Louis. And so we would just basically not have to change the line. It's referring to a thing that we learned existed, and it made the character make sense in a way that we had no idea was even true, and that the writer didn't intend, but that worked perfectly fine and was great. And so it made it work for the actors, it made it work for the audience, and it justified essentially a shot in the dark in casting. And on the opposite end, I don't know. Does one of you have a?
I was going to say.
I taught a woman how to play Fortnite, and that was because she's writing a play about a streamer. who plays Fortnite.
Yep. I was going to say I once calculated how to make a like very, very crude scale model of the distance between Earth and Mars for a play in the like lobby of the theater I was working at, so that I could attempt to get the audience to appreciate just how fucking far away Mars is and what would be entailed in like near future theoretical manned space flight to Mars.
I love that I know what play this is for.
Oh yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. I'm sure it's a play that since why am I being coy? I can say that I was involved in the development of this. It's Amy Berryman's Walden, which has since gone on to become enormously successful. I would say by the standards of new plays in the American theater. I was involved in a very tiny way at one developmental reading.
We've talked about it on the podcast because on the podcast that we do, we do actual play, but the premise is like not to produce entertainment oriented actual play. It's to play games to have a sort of like record of like, here is what they are like at the table. Not to be a nerd about it, but like there's an Evan Torner chapter that I really like that talks about the origin of actual play as like actual play reports on role-playing game forums, so that designers could hear like, what does this actually look like in play? And that's a lot closer, I think, to the intention of what we're trying to do, although we certainly would like them to be fun to listen to also. That would be cool. And then we alternate episodes of that with commentary episodes, which are sometimes it's us talking about plays or interviewing a guest about something, or one of us has done a lot of research and we want to talk about it, or something like that. It might be like an investigation into a topic or an interview, or us just kind of chatting about an idea that we think is cool related to the actual play and understanding like how that game system tells stories in a dramaturgical way.
Because ultimately, the off-week episodes of the show are the dramaturgy packet for the show that is the actual play.
Yeah, that was going to be my question: is if it was like bonus episode kind of content, or if there was space set aside to go through the actual play and to talk like do y'all talk through mechanics? What is all of that, and what does the drama TTRPG liturgy look like when y'all perform it?
Yeah, we cover, I would say, pretty much all of it. We do certainly talk mechanics. I feel like I personally love talking game mechanics, and so that's something we've discussed a lot over the years, is how, just to give one super simple example, very early on, we started with Dungeons and Dragons because we were like, we feel like we have to. And at the end of it, we were like, oh, this is a really great example of the challenges of the really flat probability curve of the D20, is that you can get these like weird troughs and patterns where in our big climactic fight in the D&D arc, there's a whole period of it where you're just listening to both the players and the big villain whiff for like 12 minutes, because every time you roll a D20, you have the exact same probability. And, we talked about how that generates a different kind of like tension and storytelling than, say, Powered by the Apocalypse, where you've got the nice pyramid of the 2d6. So there is a more sort of predictable outcome that those games revolve around, like, we know like where most of the die results are going to be, so we can build around that. But then we also build out and explore. Before we went live, we were talking about one of our episodes is titled Big Trans Mechs. It's from when we were running Lancer, and Percy and a couple of our ensemble members were talking about, the sort of the queerness of mecha media in general. So we go from the pretty nitty gritty in terms of game design and TTRPG liturgy to the big sort of media culture perspective.
Would you say that Char is masking?
I don't know. I know exactly enough Gundam to get the joke, but not enough to have an answer to that question.
Did you not make that joke on the episode?
I like that Ben and I are the only two who get that joke on this episode right now. I really hope that people have listened to UC or have watched UC Gundam out there, but you never know.
I'm not a mecha person, so I brought my two friends who are. I'm a werewolf transsexual, not a mecha transsexual.
Those are the obvious categories.
That's the two genders.
Yeah, those are the two binary poles of
transsexuality. Is you think about yourself in terms of a werewolf or in terms of a small child drafted into war,
right? Trapped in a giant steel body. Yeah,
you're in your big mechanical womb. Nothing can hurt you, but you also get to live out violent power fantasies at the same time because you're so strong and big.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like extreme sports, like in G Gundam.
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes it's just Gundam MMA with nationally coded mechs. Anyway.
Well, but I think that there is sort of a genuine like dramaturgical perspective to like making stupid jokes like this, but also to like looking into say like the genre of mecha vis-a-vis the game of Lancer, which is you're going to be telling a mecha story. You are characters in mechs that also have like the fun thing about that game is that half of it is basically powered by the apocalypse, where like you're just people outside a mech like solving a mystery that usually involves the mystery ending with, and now we have to get in our mechs and fight. And then it's the most like number station like game where like you are just reading like, okay, I rolled this and then I have this modifier on this ability and this modifier on this ability, which gives me this number of damage, and then this number of damage against this number of enemies. And so like one like person's action in one turn takes like 5 minutes of saying numbers.
Yeah. It's also a genre, and I just have to say, as in terms of TTRPG history, that it's fun to see like Lancer become popular in the way that like Jovian Chronicles in the 90s didn't. And I don't know if Mechton in the 80s ever was super popular. Like there was a series of books, but it's just reading them, the artifacts. Like it's the same game over and over of like we're normal people, but sometimes we have to hop into a giant mech and go punch other giant mechs. And like, let's think of all the reasons that could happen and create like frameworks for sort of interesting real worlds, but then all you're doing in terms of the real like gameplay aspect is rolling a shitload of dice and trying to figure out if you hit someone in the upper left pec or like the upper back left right pec quadrant or whatever, and how many like armor points versus health points, versus fatigue points. So yeah, it's great that like somehow that there was the timeliness with Lancer, and I don't know, like Twilight of the DNC, Rise of Trump, like people are like, I don't know, maybe mechs is a thing.
I wonder too if that's an artifact of Mech Warrior and kind of like the wargaming.
Like Warhammer becoming bigger in culture alongside D&D.
Interesting.
Yeah, that, but also like specifically Mech Warrior as the tabletop war game, which is very much about like where you allocate hits on a mech's body and things like that.
Well, BattleTech, Battle Mech.
BattleTech. That's what I meant. Not Mech Warrior. BattleTech. Yeah. Mech Warrior is the video game.
There's a whole universe we can go into, but that's
but I think also just like plot wise, thinking about like the idea of that, like of Lancer being popular because of the political moment we're in. The interesting thing about that season is that the GM Julia Doolittle, who is a playwright like most of our GMs, she read the scenarios for Lancer and the setting of Lancer and sort of looked at this like utopian government that sort of is essentially expanding out into the galaxy, and said, well, I don't want to be near the center of the galaxy because that's boring. Like I want to be at the edge of the galaxy where it's like this weird libertarian hyper-capitalist dystopia. And like the main characters work for like a corporation that's pretending to be the government, because that was a more interesting story to her. And so she but like eschewed the central politics of Lancer to do politics that she was interested in doing a story in.
Which is great. And that sounds maybe like a dramaturgy. I don't know, but taking the framework of the game, the structure of the narrative, and then inverting or changing it or hacking it or focusing on one element, And so I can see how thinking about that in terms of plays and how plays are produced and experienced by audiences in different times and spaces would translate into how are games played and felt at the table. And to Percy, what you're saying, kind of this record of like, it's not about the AP, it's about like, what did it feel like, right? Playing it. So before you go deeper into that, the traditional opening question is, how did y'all get into games? And there's 3 of you. So again, I don't know, maybe we'll cut this up, Chris, interestingly, into a weird, audio concrete, like we get like kind of random words and we have to piece together. Or we'll
I figured I would just layer all the tracks on top of each other and let our audience figure it out from there.
All at once.
Yeah,
Oral
all at once.
storytelling, yeah.
Beautiful.
I can go first.
Yeah, go for it, Percy.
I started playing tabletop game. I started playing video games when I was really, really young because my mom, I used to stay with our family friends often when my parents did not want me to be there for a weekend, in like a nice way, not like a scary bad way. But they had an Xbox and I played through the game Fable once each time I stayed at their house. And then eventually they just gave me the Xbox and their copy of Fable and the other Xbox games that they had. So that's how I got into games writ large, but I got into tabletop games when I was like 13 or 14 and I went to Girl Scout camp, and I don't like being outside is a thing that's true about me. And there was like a group of us who were not really interested in camp activities. So I ran a D&D, I think 3.5 game for us at summer camp. And now I am forever GM.
I see the strings now between Fable and then D&D when you're very young. It makes sense that you are not a mech, you are a werewolf person.
Thank you. And then to like complete the thread, I became like academically interested in games. I do game studies and trans studies in my research academic life. I designed an ARG for my master's thesis, which was very fun. And that's sort of the place that I've landed as most interesting to me, is like alternate reality games, pervasive games, and LARPs are really my sweet spot right now.
Yeah, I had a similar trajectory, I would say, which is I was playing video games not like quite as long as I can remember, also because I had parents who did, I think, in my view, a pretty reasonable thing of like restricting my screen time when I was, a pre-teen or below. But I had a Game Boy Color that I played Pokemon on, was I think my first video gaming experience. And then I got into D&D relatively late, I feel like, which was in my senior year of high school, because the 4th edition of D&D had just come out, and my friends who I knew played Dungeons and Dragons talked me into joining them because they said, they just released a new edition that made it a lot easier to learn the rules. So you should join us when you've been refusing for a while. And B, quote, we need another person because we've been doing a lot of running and dying lately. So that was how I was like lured into Dungeons and Dragons.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with running from a fight? Why were you trying to survive? I don't get the problem.
I mean, but they weren't having, I guess, as good a time as they wanted. So I fell into D&D and then have sort of reasonably slowly expanded from there until I started this podcast, when I very rapidly expanded, and have been sort of into weird tabletop games ever since. And also I'm a little bit less, Percy and I are both academics, and I am a little bit less firmly in the like game studies world than Percy, but I am currently researching sort of gameful applications in theater, like performance. So theater performers or creators who are really usually deliberately and certainly obviously taking like game structures and saying like, how can we put this on stage? Like, how can we turn a play into something that an audience engages with like a game, which has a lot of like cool opportunities and also like a lot of pitfalls. So that's what my research is on right now. Ben?
I sort of similarly, when I was a young teenager, a little before that, got into D&D 3.5, which was, I feel like, for a generation, the first thing you played.
For sure.
So yeah, I had a group then that I played with a little bit, and sucked really bad. Then really fell off like tabletop gaming until my 20s, when a friend was like, "Hey, do you want to join? I found this weird group on like meetup.com that's playing this weird game called Monster Hearts. Do you want to join me?" And so like my friend and I went, and then like, for I think a year or two, we played in this group every 2 or 3 weeks at a weird cafe in Midtown. Like the second floor of one of those like bodegas that has a buffet in it.
I was gonna say, was that the like Rose whatever? Rose, it's like right off Times Square.
It's like near Madison Square Park is where we went.
Okay, this is a different one than the weird cafes I went to in Midtown for tabletop meetups. Okay,
incredible. Yeah, and it was sort of then that I sort of figured out the thing that I like to do as a player, which is try to create a character that breaks it as much as possible, like conceptually. So I was a ghoul, which is basically a zombie, except for my character was the brain of like 120-year-old man in a teenager's body doing market research. So I was sort of a like weird like golem Dorian Gray. And then if I died, because they can die and come back, essentially my brain would just rocket out of my head back to a lab and be put in another body.
Can you share your character for Lancer? Because it's my favorite one.
It is a good one. Yeah.
Yes. So the Lancer guidebook says like you are human. That is a thing that it tells you about your character. It says, and it's like in bold, it's like you have to be human. And so I said, no, I don't. I'm a cat. And so what I played was I was a science experiment called 18,000, which was the brains of 18,000 cats that had been linked together with cybernetic hardware to create one sort of hive-minded being with roughly the intelligence level of a human being. And the sort of military goal of this being was to do surveillance. Well, you can see 18,000 like cats worth of things in your life and like remember them while all of them are sleeping and one of you is awake as sort of an avatar. Isn't that amazing? And then it like didn't work because it was cats, and so everything they looked at was boring. And he was like, "Okay, well, you're a mech pilot now."
Does that mean, so if you were made of 18,000 cats, does that mean that you have 162,000 lives?
Well, the thing about Lancer is that you're immortal. So if your character dies, you can be like reprinted. So like no matter what the deal with your character is, like you can be a cyborg, you can be like a human who like gets backed up every once in a while at Mickey 17 style. It doesn't really matter, but that's a thing that you can do. And so my thing was great. They put the like transponder in another cat to be the like avatar cat.
Ben, I have to say, I think that might be also my favorite Ben character. But I do also have to compliment your character in the very long-running, years-long Stillfleet campaign we played together. So I don't know if you want to also say that one, just because I think it's like such a good, weird summary character for like the party talking, know-it-all, Ocean's 11 style, problem solver.
Yeah. So again, in sort of trying to go to the edge of what the game is sort of saying you can do, I was playing as an Ox, which is essentially an artificial intelligence character. Like your character is like a computer program, sort of like a hologram in Star Trek. And also like a hologram in Star Trek, you are stuck in like a hard drive. Like you are projecting like a hologram out from like a teeny little hard drive that someone else in the party has to carry around. You can also, and you sort of change the rules for this, realizing there could be like more interpretations. Like you could also have a robot body later on. But I was the interpretation of the ox that's like a hologram out of a hard drive. And so someone else has to carry you around. And in picking classes, I was like, well, I want to be a mouse, which is essentially like a stowaway orphan who is secretly like a crafty criminal. And so I built this ox. Oxes are not allowed to have move or attack scores or combat scores that like do anything. And so I put my D12, my biggest die, into movement, because that's the thing that mouses do, is they're stealing things, they're being like crafty and running around. And we basically, what I did was I sort of hacked, like, all of my movement checks are like psychological things, or they are like conceptual things, or they are like whatever the like force field equivalent of a running tap. Like that was the strongest thing that I could do, was be like a running tap, like tap water that you can pick up. So like I could get like a piece of paper out of someone's pocket, and that was it. And it was a lot of fun. And it was a fun character because you know, you wouldn't think that like that kind of like the Doctor character would be like a weird fast talking like criminal lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, I had brought it up actually because the projection, which was many games in, when our friends asked, "Wait, what do you actually look like?" We're imagining a hologram of a human. You're acting like
yes,
a hologram of a human. You said, "I am a Neanderthal, and I am the docent. I am the digital AI concierge created by a museum in the distant past of the game, but obviously in the near future for us, the players,
yes,
about, you know, human anthropology and the history of the human species." And so you were like the friendly, you're basically the Geico caveman as like a smarty pants AI, but no one had known that. And like, it just made it so much funnier that you were also this like weird Ocean's 11 thief, but you were a hard drive who had to be like, okay, drop me down this hole and I'll solve the problem. I'll kill the bad guys.
Yes.
And it was like,
they did drop me into a wall one time. Yeah.
It was great. It was great. So we can move on from this, but I really do commend, Ben, the game breaking, because you did in a very generous way. It was very fun, and you really were very collaborative. It wasn't like a trolling, but it was like a lot of pauses at the table where people are just like, what? Okay. You know, like, sure, we'll
How
drop
does that
you down
work?
that hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So y'all have played a lot of games on your podcast.
True.
You know, we've talked a bit about D&D, obviously. We've talked a bit about Lancer, but even just like kind of scrolling through your past episodes, your past seasons, you've got, again, D&D, Bluebeard's Bride, Kids on Bikes, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, Arc. You're currently going through Our Haunt, I believe. But my question about all that is, how do you pick the games that you're playing? Is there a specific kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Is there a specific reason? Is there are there specific elements that you're looking for in a game, or is it more of just like looking at the landscape and saying this looks interesting or this is popular? How do we dive into it? However you want to take that.
I'll say, and Percy can correct me, but two things are related but slightly separate because it's changed a little bit over time. One is, I mean, obviously the fundamental thing is like things that we find exciting. The second is things that we think will be something interesting to talk about that we haven't talked about before. So just to give the sort of example of this, I have played a lot of second edition Pathfinder in my life. I really like that game. I think it's a fun, like if I'm going to play a fantasy themed tactical fighting game, I really like that. I have never suggested bringing it onto the podcast because I'm like, we did D&D, like we did a D20 fantasy game, and I don't think there's enough for us to like talk about in there. Like those two games are too similar, even though I vastly prefer the one we haven't done. Like it just wouldn't give us anything new to really talk about. And then the other thing is, and this was more true in our first couple of seasons, we used to, because we and our co-producer, who is still with the show but has stepped down from being a producer, Todd Backus, all three of us have worked in regional theater. When we began, we approached it sort of in the way we had been trained to, as though we were thinking about a like regional theater season of shows. So the first two seasons were also picked with an eye to some like, you know, variety and rhythm of variety. Particularly, I think the second season where we did a very deliberate, like, we did Blades we did 5 shows in the second season, which was too many. But we did, we had 3 shows that were sort of longer, broken up by the 2 shorter ones, and we tried to arrange them in a way that would give you some like nice tonal shifts. I think it was Blades in the Dark, and
Bluebeard's Bride,
and then Bluebeard's Bride, and then we lightened it up with Kids on Bikes, and then we got really silly with Oh Dang Bigfoot Stole My Car with My Friend's Birthday Present Inside, and then Lancer kind of capped us off with a nice big epic mech fighting thing. And since then, season 3 was also planned that way, but since then we've also been like, wait a minute, we run a podcast, not regional theater, and so we've shifted to a production model where we are more always choosing the next thing rather than tying ourselves to like, these are the 5 things we will do in the next year, which as a very small operation also gives us more room to be like, oh dang, this thing is taking longer than we thought. We don't have the sort of like self-imposed pressure of like, we said that these 5 things would be our next season, so we have to get them all done in some sort of like time frame. Is there anything I left out, Percy?
No, that's like philosophically where it's at, is like, is it a system that we haven't done before? Because like also we have played some other games that are inspired by the Powered by the Apocalypse system, but other than Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Apocalypse World, we haven't played another straight up Powered by the Apocalypse game, because mechanically they all just start to feel really similar, and because our show format requires that we have something interesting to say about the game system, we go often with game systems that we think are really interesting. But I remember for our 3rd season, we had like an ensemble caucus that Ben was a part of, where we all read like maybe...
It was like 20 games, right?
We read like 20
games.
And I remember all of those conversations were really interesting, actually, because a lot of we read this game called Blood Feud, and like, no hate or no shade, but we were all like, this is like a very interesting thought experiment, but it's not actually a very interesting game. And like, Nick and I, in fact, are planning to talk about Blood Feud on one of the commentary episodes for our Stillfleet campaign that we're going to do. Spoilers.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Because it's like, has a really interesting thing that it is trying to say, but not particularly well, we would argue, or at least not in a way that is fun to play as a game.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the other fundamental thing that I sort of alluded to, but didn't mention. Everyone in the ensemble is sort of like, I see what's trying to do, but I don't want to play this game. You know what I mean? Which is a problem.
Well, I feel like that's common with indie RPGs, which is not shade. I think it's a nature of the experiment, right? Because big RPGs have to succeed, right, monetarily, and they have production staff, and they can pay to do playtesting, and they're thinking about kind of market logics, like what do buyers want. So they're kind of reactive more and thinking about the center of gravity around D&D and Pathfinder and whatever. Whereas indie games, you don't have to do that. You don't have that constraint, but that means sometimes also you're putting up weird conceptual stuff that, like, even if lots of people like reading it, it still kind of isn't fun to play. And I think there's a lot of Emperor New Clothes games out there that are not bad, and I don't think they're bad for the world or shouldn't exist. They're just not that fun to actually play. They're really cool to read. They might have cool art. It's just kind of like at the table, you're like, yeah, I'd rather be playing maybe in your case Pathfinder, in my case, something else. But it's like another game with a more robust kind of play tested system. So I think that's also, there's a spectrum between like really robustly play tested, made for kind of lots of little design game loops, ludonarrative loops where you're getting those dopamine hits, all the way to like this sort of Philip Glass or like, a Jackson Pollock games where it's just, or what, it's like kind of what is it games. And those still are fun to like, and I've played a bunch. Actually, I think I would say like a lot of, I would say Vex, you hit a nice middle spot of like fun games that are very conceptual. Vex is in the chat. But also, while being conceptual, also actually fun to play. We just play tested a new one that I don't know if I'm allowed to shout out, but yeah, Vex has a new game that's fun where one of you is a god and the others are supplicants who like have to do a challenge, and it's like a fable kind of game. Anyway, it's fun.
Hell yeah.
But I feel like I've read lots of versions of that aren't as fun, if that makes sense. So I love what y'all are doing, because I feel like you're very ecumenical which Chris and I talked about when we started the show, like really treating all these games equally and just being like, yeah, I'm curious, like, let me read it. And in your case, you're going deep and playing it and bringing in all these kind of dramaturgical references and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, it's a cool, I feel like it dovetails a little, Chris, with some of the things you and I wanted to do. And we're like, what if we did a podcast and just talked about different games? You know what I mean?
Because I do think every season or every game that D&D does, there is one of the like off-week episodes that is sort of about like the setting of the game or the genre of the game and like other things in that genre and how they work story-wise versus doing a story in that game. And I mean, I think that's like not unlike what this show does a lot about like, you know, games, their genre and what is, you know, what they are when you play them. And that's like, I think that's interesting about every game because every game is like a way of telling a story in a setting or genre.
Yeah.
Unless it's like not for a very specific reason.
Yeah, exactly. And right, I mean, most indie designers are not unaware of those tensions with like the mass of D&D or with mechs, I guess, you know, now Lancer, whatever it is, right? There's some sort of thing you're kind of reacting to. I will just shout out because Vex said in the chat we should. I don't know when this episode will air, but Kiwi RPG Week is coming up, and Vex and other game designers we've talked to on the show are participating. And that game I mentioned, Trials, which is super fun, short game that's on itch, will be part of that. So if you're interested in a game where you play through sort of fabulistic, very short RPG encounters where a god asks you to do something, and is it one of these winnable games, Chris, which you and I played a winnable game of Eric Silver's that was fun the other day, which I'm new to this whole genre of games you can lose and win. I don't play those, so this is
that's so
a whole
crazy.
New thing.
That's like a board game, but real.
Yeah, you can be a victor.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cool.
Well, with Model Our Nations by Eric Silver, you do specifically get victory points at the end of the game. I forget what it's called in the game, but they're victory points. So there is some board game, you know, kind of zhuzhing that happens there. But it, you know, it's still fun. It's a very different mode of storytelling. Sorry, Percy.
I mean, in my youth, like, I played a lot of diplomacy for fun, which I think tells you a lot about the kind of person that I am. And there is like
It really does.
A badass.
Thank you. At least the way that we played it, there is a role-playing element to the game Diplomacy. Or at least the way that we played it. Like, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing that I'm thinking about, because there was an indie TTRPG that I think is very interesting in theory, but then I was like, oh, this game is so cool and so exciting. I'm gonna play it and then write about it for our conference. And then I played it and I was like, oh, this is not a very good game. This is not like the mechanics of this game are not actually embodying the very cool idea that the game is asking me to engage with, and I'm engaging with it as a piece of literature or as an art object is a lot more satisfying than sitting at a table with my friend and playing it. And I think there's like a degree to which the storytelling and the mechanics I think will always evoke story in some way, but it doesn't always work the opposite direction. Like, something might be very interesting in a storytelling or fictional sense, but like, if you're not hooking into it in a really direct way mechanically, that can become incredibly unsatisfying and frustrating.
And that's fundamentally the thing I find really exciting about the intersection between theater and tabletop games. I to use our catchphrase, I said recently when we were interviewing Kara Assertion, sort of jokingly, but I was like, I said something like, is a play script just a really convoluted belonging outside belonging game? Which is,
you're right.
It is.
You know, it's
a very on the rails. Very on the rails.
Yeah, exactly. And that's tongue in cheek, but both of these structures are like both these particular types of games and play scripts are blueprints for people to come together and do live things that create like feeling or affect. And some of them are more open than others. But I find that experience of like being in the doing of it I don't know, really exciting and really generative.
Well, and I think sort of to that same end, you think about the skills and rules required to do, different art forms from theater to improv to, actual play / just playing a game are not that different. Like, you have a set of rules in the case of a play, like you do have staging and a script, and like those are things that, like, if you're an actor, like you do have to go the same place and say the same thing in roughly the same way that you determined in rehearsals, and you have tools that you learned in acting school probably or somewhere else to do that in a way that is good. And playing a game is not that different. Like, you have rules to the game that you have to learn and use and sometimes reference and like do math in, that let you play the game, and you do also play it on a schedule usually, and you sort of with the same people to the same end, which is, if you're with a group of people, like to have fun, and if you're on an actual play, it is also like to have fun and like be entertaining. And they are kind of the same. And I would say playing a game is maybe closer to improv than it is to theater, but they're kind of on a spectrum of like using tools to perform.
Well, and speaking of improv, which is often rules based, I think one reason I think in this way is because when I was in undergrad, I went and studied commedia dell'arte, which is a like weird historical Italian clowning tradition that is improvised. Yes, I see Vex saying, "I'm always playing to entertain." Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I was just
because I have
that.
class clown disease.
Because I have class clown disease. But the thing about entertaining is that it still does typically follow rules. And what my commedia teacher said one time that lodged itself in my brain and affects the way I think about theater as a more and more I try to think of theater as a process rather than a like art object. Because what he said to us once was, he said, commedia, where you have in commedia, you'll have a scenario, which is not a script, but it's just sort of like bullet points of actions. Instead of saying like, the character comes in and says this, it will be like, Arlecchino comes in and is like looking for his boss. And that's all you're told. So you know what you're doing, but you don't know what you actually, it's up to you what you say, how you do it, etc. And what he said to us one time is that commedia, that's improv, and acting to a script are the same thing, just in the script there's a much higher level of like detailed specificity. But because of the way it's live, there's still, you are making choices, as actors will tell you, like you're always making active choices on stage. It's just that instead of knowing, okay, I'm looking for my boss, it's like, okay, I'm coming on and going here and I'm saying this exact line, but I'm still making choices like within those constraints. And I sort of see games, again, they kind of collide in the middle here where I'm like, but what does it mean if you play a game? Some of those weird lyric and indie games are like very prescriptive, but there's still room for play in there, and they can still generate really interesting stuff.
Well, I think some of it is like a spectrum of not just scripted theater to commedia dell'arte or improv, but also to ritual, right? And the sort of anthropological gaze of like, which I think has more to do with the audience. So I think it's turning from an outer audience toward an inner audience at the same time that you're going from the granularity of a script, although, where like, if you think of a Hollywood movie at one end, where every single moment has been, produced to death, 15 different AIs have shown people in 17 countries, and they've voted on every line, all the way to like kind of a ritual that's very secret and sacred, and for a small group of people. And not only is it not streamed, but like they don't even talk about it, and I think there's a whole, there's a lot of wiggle room and fun you can have with kind of thinking about how these things feel very different, but in some ways are the same. They're people putting on masks. They're becoming avatars, and then they're doing weird, zany, funny shit. And half of the time, it is just to entertain each other, whether the other being out there or like my friends around the table.
I mean, there is a straight line from the Choric Dithyram, which is one of the earliest recorded Greek religious rituals that was a performance, to the season 2 finale of The Rehearsal, which is a television show about flying planes. Can
we get that word again? Choric Dithyram?
The Choric Dithyram.
Choric Dithyram.
Yes. Dithyram.
Bam.
Sounds like a rapper from Atlanta.
It really does.
It was a rapper from Athens, circa 600 BCE.
But what I was thinking was, from a GM's perspective, it's actually not that different from a story, right? Because like as a GM, you have a scenario, you know, whether it's from a pre-written module or a book, or you've written it yourself, or you're making it up on the fly. You have like a thing that you put in front of your players with the game, and the players make choices. And most games work like this, right? And then the GM has like generally like a list of paths that it could go down, but like major characters who are along those paths and the kinds of things that they would do, and ultimately you're improvising and figuring that out as people make the decisions. But at the same time, I would say generally when I GM, I do have like not tunnel vision, but like what's the reverse of tunnel vision, where like you see like a giant bright light that gets way brighter the farther it goes out, and it's like, okay, well, I know where this could go, but it's gonna be
alien abduction.
Yeah,
I think that's
I was going to say
that's
I think
astigmatism.
You gotta get that checked out. I mean, the thing that also makes me think of, which is something that I think about a lot in my research, is the way that theater and tabletop games work with like tiered authorship, because there's no singular author of the final experience. Like somebody wrote the play, then the director is making an interpretation of that play, and the designers are making an interpretation of that play, which is all layered, and then the actors are interpreting what they are being told by the director to do and what they're picking up from in the script, and then the audience is doing interpretive work to receive that experience shaped by all of these things. In the same way that like I design a tabletop role-playing game, the GM picks it up and says, oh, this is the thing that I'm going to do within this system. This is the specific story I'm going to tell. And even if I have a module that I've written that is like, here is the adventure, you're still doing interpretive work to shape that adventure for your table. And then the players are going to do whatever the fuck they want to do with it, etc. So there's this like much longer chain of authorship that creates a more sort of collaborative experience across.
And that keeps going up because like critics do another level of that. As do people doing marketing, as do people reading those reviews and those advertisements to then go see the thing and make their own interpretation of it. And it
as
really
do
is
people
all...
who are like D&D, I'm gonna play D&D like a dating sim, even though that's not because I saw this person do this thing and it seemed really fun, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Well, listen, if I learned anything from Baldur's Gate 3, it's that D&D is basically a dating sim.
I have not played that game, but as far as I can tell, it is about the relationships.
It's about fucking a vampire, right?
It's about fucking that one guy.
It's about fucking whomever you choose. A vampire, a half demon, a drow, a Githyanki from an outer plane. Like you take your pick.
A lot of people seem to have chosen the vampire.
Oh, he's very sexy, I will say. Yeah. Anyway.
My last experience of video games was World of Warcraft, which was a bunch of people standing around pretending to be orcs or like bison people, I think, and being like, hey, do you want to join my guild and go on a raid? And then someone else be like, this is an RP tavern. You need to RP. And it's like, I am RP. In the world of the game, I, an orc, want to go on a raid. And it was
I'm asking as my character.
Exactly. Dude, if they were using... the words like, it's like I exogenously I would go on a raid, but diegetically also I want to go, it was ridiculous. So I have to say, video game people think like everyone thinks the same way about these things. It just has different levels of articulation. I'm
gonna start declaring places an RP tavern.
Yeah,
I'm just there.
Yeah, in the real world.
Bar. Yeah.
An RP tavern.
Hey,
I would love that if like
you're an elf right now, okay?
Yeah, you only drink mead when you're an elf.
Yeah.
You have to order mead.
People come into my
one
place
flagon.
and order a beverage. Yeah, was that what your character would order?
Yeah. You got a martini? I don't know if a halfling would drink that.
Yeah, you have to order special pizza. That's I got like
dwarves would never drink oat milk.
I don't know. This is true. Dwarves have a high level of lactose intolerance because they live underground, so there's no cows. So I don't know.
I guess that's
they
actually
drink rock milk.
Well, okay, also dwarves are, like, in the Tolkien conception of dwarves, they are based on Jews who are lactose intolerant, I can tell you. I'm not, but I know many who are.
Well, there we go. We're bringing
All
it
right.
back. To
I
history and
lucked
politics.
out.
The point
I
of the
lucked
show.
Yay, Tolkien.
Yay, Tolkien again. The shadow
Well,
of
but I
Tolkien
think
looms
that,
over
like,
us.
the shadow of Tolkien does loom over us.
It does,
and
yeah.
then, you know, all the idea of like what you can be in a game, a lot of it does directly track back to Tolkien thinking like, here's this cool race in the real world
Yeah.
and the things about them.
Yeah.
What
Well, a
if
lot
they
of
were
it,
taller and shorter?
I don't know if this is completely apocryphal or not, but I remember reading sometime back that when Gygax was designing D&D, moving it from chainmail to war game into D&D, he like did not want to do any of the fantasy races. Like any of the Tolkien-esque stuff was not really included in the game. And it's only because his playtesters insisted that they got to play like hobbits or elves or stuff that he was like, fine, we'll make it fantasy. And now we all have to fucking live with it forever.
I'm told I'm far from a Gygax expert, quite the opposite, but I am told that because Tolkien is so popular, we, the tabletop community, consistently overestimate the influence of Tolkien and underestimate the influence of, I think it's Michael Moorcock.
Oh yeah, we definitely
Yeah.
underestimate the. Thank you so much for saying that. Michael Moorcock is
Michael
so
Moorcock-
good.
So important.
The Eternal Champion cycle. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
And I think was Tolkien, if I'm remembering correctly, because I have not read Michael Moorcock, but I think
should
he
read
was
Michael
the one that
you gotta
Tolkien-
do it. You gotta read Elric.
I think he's the one that Tolkien was more enthusiastic about, or excuse that Gygax was more
Yes.
enthusiastic about.
Yeah. Well,
if I
Gygax was
remember.
really into like I'm blanking on it. Wythe. What's Dying Earth? Jack Vance.
Oh, Jack Vance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were going
yeah.
to say losing money.
Yeah.
Well, that too. He was big on that. Yeah.
That was coincidental, actually.
Yeah. But it is fun to think about. I know on this show we talk a lot about the history of RPGs, and we talk about history and politics because Chris and I really like that. But I think it's interesting. Your show has a lot of parallels, but it's funny how these spheres don't always overlap. Like I just don't know enough about theater, so when you talk about some of the playwrights and stuff, I'm Googling, but it's all new lore, you know. So you might as well. You could just make stuff up. Which I don't know if you've seen. This is a side note, but you know, we talk about AI sometimes as we're pretty anti-generative AI and just most AI. There a lot of the book club lists that going around have had totally hallucinated, but plausible, cool-sounding titles by famous authors. And some of the authors would be like, "I definitely don't have a book of that title that you should read. Like, I would like that would be awesome, but like that's not a thing."
Didn't one of those get published in like the Chicago Sun-Times?
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah.
Like an actual newspaper published a recommended reading list that included a book that didn't exist.
Multiple.
Well,
books.
the book I think technically exists. It's just it's just like the hallucinated garbage of an AI model of a large language model.
So it is a real book that you can go and buy and read.
It's not.
No. What I'm talking about, this is I just put the link. So there was a list of summer reading that got published in a bunch of papers that features a bunch of books that do not exist. So they're real authors, but then there's like this was just like reposted everywhere, and I think it's interesting that like it goes to like the death of journalism, that people just picked it up and we're like, yeah, this looks plausible because the authors are plausible, the titles sound good. But I think that's, I don't know, there's something about that. I don't know where it's going with this, but just basically AI is really bad. And I think it's worth knowing kind of the real history and lore and kind of engaging with it deeply. And there is a lot to know. I guess maybe that was just my point is like Dungeons and Drama Nerds does a great job of unearthing some of these connections that, having thought a lot about RPGs, I've never thought of. So I feel like it's a great show, just as a little plug to learn something new, even if you feel like you know a lot about games. That's not a question.
I was going to say it's very nice of you to say that, because I feel like I'm still my entree to tabletop RPGs was so gradual at first that I feel like I'm still playing catch up on the history and like rich diversity. Like I don't know shit really about the like 80s, 90s. By the time we get to the aughts, I'm starting to be like backwards familiar with it, but there's a lot of stuff that I just don't know.
Well, it helps, Nick, if you're 40 or 40 something and you were unpopular as a child, then you'd know way more about games. You are youthful, sprightly, however old you are, and obviously had a great childhood. So you don't need to know anything about these games until the OSR. They start getting good around 2010.
Nick is
everything's
61
before
years
that.
old.
Counterpoint, no hot gods ever asked me to play Vampire the Masquerade, and I feel like I really missed out.
I really do feel like I missed out.
Yeah.
When you read tabletop scholarship from like the early aughts up to about 2010, the influence of Vampire the Masquerade is
Massive.
And
yeah.
There's also a lot of
Great
fucked up
game.
shit in Vampire the Masquerade, and not
Yeah,
fucked up in
game,
like
but
a
a great
fun way.
game.
Great
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Well, again,
I've
everyone
never
wants
touched
to
it.
everyone wants to fuck the hot vampire. It's in the
Yeah.
it's in the very life essence of the tabletop community. Is that we all want to fuck
true.
vampires.
I do have
Yeah.
one more substantive question, and Chris, you may have more, but and this it could be related to vampire fucking or werewolf fucking or mecha fucking. But it is
Some combination of the three.
Ooh.
just
Well,
because I
it's
think it's
now.
super cool. Skip Bash. Can you tell us about sort of these randomly, basically how you put together some different episodes that are not your main seasons that are really lovely and fun and weird, and have led to, I think, some interesting kind of experiments. So this is, I think you alluded to it, but I think that's something we didn't really talk about because the main seasons are great, but they're like AP plus commentary, right? So we've heard about that. What's up with Skip Bash?
Percy, who's the sandwich guy?
Oh, Adventures in Ardia's Roll for Sandwich series on TikTok inspired our Skip Bash show because we had when we first launched our Patreon, we were like, oh, our bonus content is going to be, we're going to interview all of the people in our ensemble, but that is a finite number of people so we ran out of people, and we were like, well, sort of interviewing random people is probably not the way to go. So we had a meeting and we were like, what's the show going to be? And I was talking about
And then you did a second interview of me that turned into a very, very strange bit. And that was one episode.
It was.
Where I
Yes, we
made
did.
fun
I
of New York
forgot about
Times
that
theater critic Jesse Green.
And it is worth listening to. However, I would say Skip Bash is potentially more worth listening to.
Way more.
Do we not like Jesse Green? Is there a...
He's so do you know how ostriches sort of put their heads in the ground in mythology? Like, they don't actually do this.
Yeah,
People
in
think they do
mythology.
this.
Yeah.
So he's found a way to do that for real, but with his own ass.
Oh, that's awesome. Good for him.
Good for him. So anyway, so Skip Bash is a show that we came up with because we were like, we're gonna do a world building show, and I don't think any of us knew what that meant. I think we were all like, it could be fun to build worlds together. And then somehow we landed on, we're gonna roll on a random table for a play, like a well-known play and a well-known tabletop game, and we're going to spitball for 45 minutes to an hour about how we would like tell that story in that role-playing game system, or sometimes gaslight old men into
We'll get there.
Yeah.
This is specifically Ben Ferber's bit that Percy is alluding to.
I have a different interpretation that I've started to do of the prompt for Skip Bash.
Yeah.
But often it's like some combinations that we've done. We did Sweeney Todd and Blades in the Dark.
I mean,
think
that
that's right.
feels like that clicks pretty well.
Yeah.
We did Blades in the Dark was the Baltimore Waltz.
Oh, that's
Yes,
right.
you're right,
Oh,
you're
that's
right.
right.
Yes. Have we done
Call-
Sweeney Todd? I'm not
We
sure
have done Sweeney Todd and Masks, which was surprisingly good.
Yes, I was going to say the real issue with this, if you've seen Roll for Sandwich, the TikTok series, part of the delight, this man is
He rolls on a bunch
sandwiches.
of tables. One of the tables is for bread. One of the
Yeah.
tables is for protein. One of the tables is for roughage. One of the tables is for sauce. And the things that are on the tables are like the things that he has in his house. And then with all these random rolls, he makes a sandwich and decides whether it's good or not. And
He eats the whole thing.
Often he makes a sandwich that does not work conceptually or flavor-wise.
And here's the issue. The not working is part of the entertainment of the bit. And the issue with Skip Bash is that we keep coming up with ideas that I actually think are pretty cool and would like to play. Like too many of them. We were like, oh, this will be absurd. But we keep coming up with things that I actually think would be pretty fun, or at least make sense in a way that I we did one of my favorite ones, even though I don't think I really want to play this game, Pygmalion, which is the basis of My
Fair Lady.
Thank you. My brain just shorted out. Yes, My Fair Lady and Cyberpunk, which is like, well, yeah, Cyberpunk. The man is literally like reconstructing this woman in the play, just on a social level, but like it's a pretty easy way to come up with like I think you could do a pretty cool cyberpunk interpretation of Pygmalion in a game or not, and we keep kind of having things like that happen, which is fun. But also I was expecting more of a I was expecting us to struggle more in entertaining ways. Instead, we just keep coming up with amazing ideas that I want to play around with.
Well, that points back to the beautiful. Like I'm Glorilla, like I'm from Atlanta. That just points back to the kind of beautiful. I forgot what I was going to say. It doesn't even matter. Fucking.
It's beautiful.
It's fun though. Beauty
Atlanta,
of randomness, improv.
Oh, now I remember. So yeah, it kind of goes back to the beautiful generative nature of TTRPGs to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Chris, final questions?
Yeah, sure. Where can folks find Dungeons +/and Drama Nerds? Where can we find all of you individually? How can we best support you as we all grow this this community of content making fools?
You can find Dungeons and Drama Nerds at our website, dungeonsanddramanerds.com, and our social media handle on everything is DN Drama Nerds. D, the letter N, Drama Nerds.
Drama Nerds.
All one word.
I don't know. I have a website that's my full name, which is Percival Hornak. After the round table night, not Percy Jackson, is a thing that I have to clarify to every student I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Yeah.
But it's also very on brand for me to have named myself after like a famous loser dweeb who can't get the Holy Grail.
Who like fails so hard to find the Grail. It's so good.
That's such a good story, though.
It is.
It's a
great story.
Great poem.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I have a website where you can find my work. I have an article coming out this month in the Analog Game Studies Journal.
Oh, hell yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. About trans analog game studies and lyric games and how we should all be weirder, basically.
Yeah.
How about how we should do scholarship in a weirder, looser way.
Very cool.
That's my plug.
My website is currently under reconstruction, so you can't find anything there. But when it's up, it'll be at nicholasorvis.com. You can find me on Instagram at norvis, Orvis 13. You can theoretically find me on formerly known as Twitter, but I don't actually go on there anymore and should really deactivate that account. And otherwise, I'm very bad at social media, so that's about it.
I am still on Twitter, and I love
Twatter.
being there. And I will never leave until they drag me off.
Which they will.
They will. To jail.
Yeah,
but you can find
into an unmarked van.
Real. You can find me at Ben Ferber everywhere on every social media platform, except for the ones I'm not on. And you can also hear me on the Questing Network podcast.
Oh,
That's
true.
Which we may remarket and do more episodes of. Who knows? In the future, that'll be a problem for future Chris and Wythe.
Hooray!
Yay! I'm going to make it Ben's problem.
You have any problem? There you go.
That's another podcast where I am a high concept character. Fasole, the demon knight, a knight who cannot use weapons.
That's true. You can
very
only
true.
rules lawyer people. It feels a little similar to the final Neanderthal sort of rules lawyery thief child who's a hard drive, who's a docent for a museum that no longer exists. Weirdly enough, but
up my game because my last character on the podcast was Sad Cat.
Sad cat.
Just a sad ragdoll cat.
It's not all in the concept. Sometimes it's in how you play it. You know,
right?
You can make a sad ragdoll cat very interesting.
Yeah. That was for our haunt game, and it wasn't. I thought it was interesting. It was also just such a sad the saddest campaign I've ever played in my entire life.
Our haunt's a real downer, y'all. At least when we play it.
All the more reason to listen. Well, we love it.
Do you want to be sad? Listen to Dungeons plus Drama Nerds.
maybe y'all want to check out Danse Macabre sometime. We'll do a sad one-off. Philosophical about the end of the world and zombie mutants, and
it's extremely sad.
Very sad. Really fun. All right, or
die.
The trials. Yeah. Some of us will play with Vex, and some of us will fail to do our quest, like Percival, and we'll have told a good story, but God will be like, "Nah, bro, the princess is in another castle."
Cool story, bro.
Yeah. Maybe God talks like that. We did it. We did a bunch of words. All right. With that, I think this has been Why We Roll. Big ups to Percy Hornak, Nicholas, Orvis, Ben, Ferber, and of course our own Christopher Pickett.
Oh, thank you.
Vex in the chat, and everyone listening at home, have a wonderful evening.
Wait. Big ups to you, Wythe.
Oh,
hell yeah, brother.
Yeah. All right, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye. I'm clicking end the stream.
Hey.